everybody. I'm Kestra Pingree, fantasy author, and today I wanted to look at fantasy maps, their place in books, or not place, as the case may be, and also how to make one. Let's do this. So yeah, do you expect maps in your fantasy? I do, depending on the subgenre. Let's talk about that. If you read epic fantasy, you've probably read Brandon Sanderson. If not, I have a book here, for example. A small version. I don't have any of his big hardbacks, but you know, whatever. Well, I guess I have one, but it's not an epic fantasy. I digress. Even this little guy, Warbreaker, has a map. Voila. See it? Cool. Epic fantasy, you know, big sprawling worlds, usually war, that sort of thing covered in these stories. I usually expect a map, but that's not always the case, even in epic fantasy. Books just really don't have much of a standard, I've come to find as I've learned about formatting and everything. Because even the text inside of books is always different sizes, you know, changing what page number a story would be. And I say that because obviously maps aren't standard either. There's lots of questions to ask when you're thinking about adding a map to your series. Like, is it necessary? You either have to do it yourself or pay money, and then there's the formatting of it, whatever, you know? I like maps, so I wanted to do one for my series, The Lost Princess of Howling Sky, because it's sort of a, well, it's a high fantasy with tech, so it kind of breaks the typical medieval European setting that most high fantasy, epic fantasy is in. But it doesn't matter. I wanted it to have that high fantasy, epic fantasy feel. So let me show you what I mean. This is the first book in The Lost Princess of Howling Sky, taken by werewolves. And there's my map. See, and I didn't format my map in the standard, well, it's not standard, I just said there's no standards, where a lot of the time maps will be 2-page spread, right? This one's just single. And part of the reason I did that for this series is that just happened to be how my world was built, and I was thinking about ebooks, because having that horizontal it's just not very nice looking in ebooks. You have to, it's so small when you just look at the page, unless you read your books like this. Which you could, I don't, but that's the thing about ebooks. Formatting with ebooks is not like paper, because people can change things, the font and everything inside, so I try to make my ebooks as simple as possible so people can format them to their liking. Let's continue on with the examples. Chronicles of Narnia! So these are like middle grade books, and probably different versions have maps. They might, I don't know. All I know is that the versions I have do not. And this is like alternate world, right? So it totally could have a map, but it doesn't. It does have cool illustrations though. Again, not a standard thing. Could have them, might not have them. Brandon Sanderson seems to really like illustrations. I've been currently reading Warbreaker ebook, so I guess I won't show that here. But it has a lot of pictures in it, you know, from maps to illustrations. And it's pretty nice, it's a nice touch. Usually in contemporary fantasies, or at least contemporary in that they're still in our world, you know, everything's kind of placed where it is. You don't really see maps. No maps in this book. However, this book is kind of a contemporary. Kind of. This is a fictional school, and yeah, that's a fun idea. You can have a map of the school. See, maps aren't restricted to a big, sprawling, epic fantasy world. You can do maps if you want. Golden Compass. This book is a lot of like alternate worlds, well, this series, and so it's kind of, I think it'd be hard to have a bunch of maps for whatever. And I didn't want to restrict this to traditional books only, so here is an indie book of Karpov Kinraid's, which, yeah, this is in a big high fantasy world. And they didn't do a map for this one. Ha! I say that. It doesn't start in a big fantasy world, and that's the thing. I have books like this too, where I have like an alternate dimension that the character goes to, but it starts in the contemporary world, and I haven't done maps for those either. Red Queen doesn't have a map. It's like a dystopian world, and I've noticed a lot of dystopian don't typically have maps, but this is also fantasy, so could have a map. This one has a map. See? Another way to format. No standards. One more indie book. Could have a map, but does not. So there you go. That's just kind of a look at how different all these books are, even though these are all fantasy books. You don't need to have a map, you could have a map. It's really up to you, I'd say, and if you think it benefits the story or not. The biggest thing I think is a map should be an addition and not a necessity. I think everything that a reader needs to know should be in the text itself. But maybe that's just a personal opinion. What do you think? Either way, if I'm not gonna have an official map, I often like to make myself a little doodle of a map so that I know where everything is, because I'm kind of a visual person, so it's great to have all these things written down in like a series Bible or something, but I like to have a visual representation of where everything is. So, go through books like I did and get a good idea of what you want your map to look like, and then you get started. One more thing to think about with maps is, I read an article, I don't remember where it was, but it talked about how sometimes maps aren't included in books because they add spoilers, and I thought that was interesting. So that's another thing to consider. And I will go to the next part of this video, screen capture, and I'll show you how I created my map. Okay, on to the screen capture portion of this video. So, I was going to show you my process a little bit about the rough draft of my map to the final version. So let's take a look. My rough sketches are really rough because I just need to know the placement of everything and kind of the idea of what I'm going for. All those maps I looked at in those books are a good starting place for, you know, what kind of style I'm looking for in my map. I knew I wanted the castles to be the main highlight of my kingdoms, and I wanted to hand draw those, so I went ahead and did that. I hand drew everything except I only drew the mountains once and the trees once, because then it was just, I don't know, I decided I would duplicate them and move them around rather than draw each of them by hand, because I liked how it looked uniform, more like a symbol used on the map rather than some huge illustration when I wanted the illustration to be left to my castles, because they're the focal point. I don't know. That was just my thought process. And I also didn't want to draw a million trees. So call it laziness, I suppose, but I like how it turned out. So, haha. I did use a stock photo for the old paper look. I liked that, so I wanted it to be the base for my map. And obviously, I didn't handwrite the text because I have horrible handwriting. In this world, the world is very small. As you can see on the map, I have the outer edges of the map grayed out. And the reason for that is because only the small section that isn't grayed out, shaded, is livable in this world. And that's because of the Hellfire Strike. And that's why After Hellfire is on my map. Because I'll go into this later, but I have just recently expanded this world, so I'll make another video about that. But part of the reason why I thought a map would be a good idea for this world is because of how nice and concise and small it is. So this is our playing field, and that's it. We don't go beyond that. And so it was nice for me to have those boundaries because this was my first real attempt at writing a high fantasy series. So I wanted to have something manageable instead of a huge sprawling world I had to think about. And yeah, there you go. I think it actually turned out really well. And now I'm not too scared to, make a bigger world. I think this was a great starting point for me. Meet yourself where you're at and keep growing. And yeah, that's about it. I've got links below to the Lost Princess of Howling Sky series if you would like to check it out. Probably just one link. I'll just link you to my website. And yeah, if you like this video, remember to subscribe, like, ring the bell if you want to see more of me. And I'll be back next week. Thank you for joining me.